Andy says, I'm from the Midwest, and I often come across people who aren't into politics at all, but they still have opinions about the left that are obvious right-wing propaganda. How do I address that without being too harsh? In question. What do we think?
I get this a lot from my own family. They know that I have like a political podcast and I talk about it all the time. And so I get like their uneducated political opinions, and you can tell it's all telephone politics, where they'll hear somebody who saw something through a Facebook meme. And I never know how to actually address this. I'll usually shoot it down, but try to be polite so I don't because if they're not if they're not really informed, I don't want to be aggressive because I want them to be receptive to what I'm saying. So usually I say, that doesn't sound right, and then I'll move on to like something else. But I don't think that that's the correct way. I think that there's got to be a way to like open the door to a broader conversation, but like, how do you have that when you're trying to walk that fine line by getting them interested, but also telling them that they're wrong, because that's kind of like a turnoff to politics.
Ole, you want to go? I also have strong opinions on this topic.
You want to go for? It's up to you.
Go nuts.
All right. I think you frame it never as an indictment, and you start it as from a certain level of your own, like you yourself came from that same position as them, and you go into it with the understanding that there's nothing that you are going to say, that you can say, that will make this person like completely drop their worldview in this one conversation. Like you have to approach everything. Like you're just here to impart nuggets of information as you can. And this will be a process, and hopefully eventually people move along and not get yourself too invested in the conversation. But I know for me, like when I approach abolition, when I do things in interviews, I tend to start from when I talk to my family, when I have my friends, from the place of letting this sounded wild to me at first too, or I didn't know this, or I was educated in this way, so I had perceived it that way. It immediately takes people off to the defensive. Like you're not, lording yourself, because that's really what makes people defensive is thinking you think I'm wrong, you think you're smarter than me, you think you know. So the minute you kind of disarm it, like actually no, and it becomes a kind of a information gathering process. You know what I mean? They feel like they're in a discussion and not really a debate. Like that to me is what makes a lot of like leeway in the long run.
Great point.
The thing that I hear the most often, and that usually pisses me off in terms of like this is not real, is I hear a lot of right-wingers drop either in my emails or my chats and stuff say, why does the left hate white people? And I feel like liberals broke a whole bunch of conservative brains maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know when White Fragility came out. Whenever that book came out and it was doing the rounds and it was on like Jimmy Fallon, and Jimmy Fallon was like, well, I'm white? What? I think like right-wingers saw that shit and they're like, oh God. And that's where a lot of this weird ass, they've taken
what did Jimmy Fallon do? I missed this.
Like when that book was going around, it was doing the rounds. It was on late night TV. Fucking Jimmy Kimmel did it too. He's like, what? I too am white? Like all of them like, oh my God, I'm now acknowledging this for the first time. Anyways, it was clown shoe shit. I think that really affects a lot of people. It couldn't be further from the truth. There's no such thing as leftists hating white people. That's just weird straw man where it's just like critical race theory teaches you that like white babies are racist and time is racist and white people are inherently racist. All that shit is nonsense. What I keep telling you is like, it has nothing to do with that. What we're trying to do is when I want to talk about these topics, I reduce it to very simple concepts. You've heard like, that woke CRT is coming after you, Marxist theory, neo-Marxist, postmodern neo-Marxism, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. All I think that I'm trying to advocate for, if you reduce it to a simple thing, is freedom. Like you like freedom in your day. Well, where do you spend 8 hours of your day every day? In your workplace? Do you have freedom in your workplace? You don't, because you have a tyrannical system where a boss controls everything. I want to expand that. I want to give you more like voting power, democracy in your workplace where you spend 8 hours a day. Hey, did you know that coincides with a lot of other things? Economically, this intersects with things that don't even really exist in the real world. Racial theory. But you know what? Races aren't real. We made them up. Human beings made them up, but they intersect because of capitalism, the history of slavery, all this kind of stuff. As this shit all interconnects, you can finally start to realize that, hey, we can liberate everyone if we start to expand. Like, go from there. Don't start on the other end in their playing field where everything is fucked up and they're like, so you hate white people. No, Actually, I'm advocating for a lot of poor ass white people. You know who hates white people? Tucker Carlson. He says and talks like a white supremacist, but he only likes rich white people. He hates poor white people. They all do. Doesn't matter who they are. Every single one of them hates poor white people. The whole system is rigged that way. They'll advocate for it. They'll talk about it. They'll be like, oh, yes, we have to talk about replacing that. And he can be a white supremacist. He can hold up white supremacy. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of fucked up shit that affect white people. And I always get that thrown at me. They're always like, the left hates white people, all that shit. I'm like, no, that's not true.
I think what you're picking up on is exactly why I think it's a mistake for the left to play our advocacy towards the emotions of white people. Like the way that we do it, I think this is a major limitation. I've written about this is, oh, I'm gonna appeal to your sympathy. Like this idea that this current world, even how we frame white privilege, right? This current world, the argument we essentially make is white privilege allows you to benefit. You are benefited by the society that we live in, but I want you out of the goodness of your heart, out of alliance to me, I want you to advocate to a world that is against your maybe better interests, but will be more equitable. And the reality of who people really are is there's a limit to how much people will ever be for your team if they believe it doesn't serve them, which is why it's a better, I think, approach to frame things from if we actually had an actual conversation around class solidarity and what is a lived reality and economics and things like that, we could actually show people, no, the argument should be this current world is not good for any of fucking us. That's why I always say, like, when people say they respond with like, oh, police kill white people too. Like, yeah, that's actually a good point. This is actually not a racial problem. This is not a black problem. This is a collective problem with policing. And so we should be having conversations and framing it from that way in this class solidarity way. Like, oh, actually, no. This current world, it's not that you're being privileged by white privilege. No, actually, poor white people, this white identity that has been crafted, which is a craft, is actually harming you a lot, actually. You are not doing well. This is not working for you. And that's actually where your actual issue lies. And if you align with us, we could advocate for things that are actually in your best interest. Because I think about that very often. When I see a lot of the white people, a lot of the bigots that be so very angry at the things you advocate for, I'm like, you're better served than me, sweetie. I'm doing better than you. You know what I mean? Class-wise and life, things like this. Like, these things would better serve your interest, but you're so galvanized around what you've been fed as a white identity politic, you can't see that. So I think you're picking up on something excellent and how we should frame from that class solidarity way.
You know, the first thing that's ever in real time, in my experience, like actually flipped 180, like a Republican's view on this, is he was like, I'm always told about this white privilege shit. And he's like, I've been poor my entire life. I don't feel any kind of privilege. And I was like, agreed. So you can be oppressed if you're a white person by poverty, by class. That they don't ever mention that part. The way they shouldn't frame it is that like you have a special superpower because you're white. The way they should frame it is that if you and your friends are on shrooms, if the cops come knocking, if you're the white person in the group, you should go talk to the police and you should be the one that gets everyone off, kind of thing. As in, you should understand it from that perspective. Not that you should walk around every day like you have a superpower. Not that you should feel that you were born into privilege just by virtue of being white, right? And I think that's usually why it's taught incorrectly, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you all gave great answers. I mean, I got nothing to add there. In terms of like, I agree completely with, I mean, all of you, but Oleemi on how you put yourself in that person's shoes and you try to see from their perspective to then, you know, talk about these topics. I think that's the best, like in terms of one-on-one conversations, I think that's the best way to approach it. In terms of speaking to like an audience on YouTube, obviously it's a little different depending on who your audience is, who the video's for. Like when I cover a video, like say a clip from The View, for example, when Meghan McCain was on, she would say something stupid. I would realize that a lot of viewers that don't typically watch political videos may come across that because they watch, you know, clips of The View or something. So I would, you know, angle the commentary towards that, because the whole purpose for me anyways is to bring new people into the conversation and be able to educate those people and want them to continue learning. So it's all about the audience who you're talking to, and that I think helps to define the framing around those discussions.